Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the Starfleet Night Shift. Our continuing mission to discuss strange new worlds, to review Star Trek in all its iterations, to boldly talk about Trek we've all seen before. Welcome, everyone. My name is Captain Merrick, and today I'm joined by both my fabulous co-hosts, Commander Jennifer and Science Officer Azure. So today's topic is going to be pretty cool. It's going to be pretty broad. I have been thinking about this a lot, and I think for a lot of us who have been lifelong Star Trek fans, people that have been fans of the franchise since the beginning, or whatever it is, the beginning for them, I think that's exactly what it is that we're going to talk about tonight. Your generation of Star Trek, where you ended up getting into this fandom. I think that we talked a couple of weeks ago about like how you got into it being exactly how you would like to be able to get your friends into it, right? Somebody asked, how do you get your friends into Star Trek? What's the best way to do that? And among all the other topics that came up, one was, it sort of ended up becoming that I think we all believe we want to get someone into Star Trek the same way that we got into Star Trek. To me, it's like clear and simple. It's cut and dry, very easy. The best way to get into Star Trek, if you can manage it, is to get in through TNG. And I thought, like, that's crazy to have anybody else disagree with that. And Jennifer, who grew up with TOS, was like, no, you should watch TOS. And that is, it's crazy to me, but I think it's because you have such a nostalgia attached to the way in which you got into Star Trek. And that really speaks to today's topic. Every generation of Star Trek is dramatically different. And we had this like 15-year period of time where there was no Star Trek, right? We had TNG, and we had Deep Space Nine, and we had Voyager, all sort of overlapping each other. In fact, DS9 never even ran without another show overlapping it concurrently, right? So they had this golden era of Trek, which was all set in not only the same universe, but the same time frame with the same overlapping characters. You could see one character appear in one episode of one show, and then later they could reprise their role in the next show or the next one. And each of those were 7 seasons each. This was like an era of Star Trek. And we feel very strongly about it. Those who grew up with that feel very strongly about it. I myself feel very passionate about that era of Star Trek. And when 15 years of time went by and we had no Trek to speak of, no new Trek to speak of, there was a clamor for more. And there's always going to be a huge reaction to the next Star Trek. I wanted more. I wasn't protective of it. There are people out there that are like, no, never make a remake, never do a sequel. It's going to ruin the previous iteration. And for me, that's usually not true. I don't feel like adding more ever detracts from the previous until the new age of Star Trek. So for me, I watched, those shows passionately, religiously growing up. And then when a new show was announced and Discovery was on the horizon, I was incredibly excited. I was reading everything I could. I was just absolutely thrilled that we're going to see a new iteration of Star Trek. And unfortunately, just like I felt when they announced Enterprise and it was going to be a prequel, I was a little bummed. And then when they announced the new movies, but they were going to be remakes of the original series, and it was going to be, again, sort of going back in time. When I heard that Discovery was going to do the same thing, I was equally kind of bummed out. But what was really initially this sort of like resentment of it, gave way to excitement. New Star Trek, I didn't care. I was just excited there was going to be something new graphics, new characters to explore, a new ship, of course, like the new ship reveal is always a huge deal. So I was so excited about all these things. And I'm here to tell you guys right now, okay? I've been trying not to harp on this too much in the last 4 podcasts before this, but getting into modern Trek was a little difficult for me. I will not lie to you. I represent a very specific era of Star Trek. And when the next generation, if you forgive the term, came out with Discovery and then leading into Picard, and the tonal shift that happened in all of Star Trek when these new series came out, there became a really clear delineation, a really stark dichotomy between my generation of Star Trek and the next generation of Star Trek. And I ended up becoming
I think resentful really is the word. I would say, why are they going to make something in this universe that I love and then change it so much? Why are they going to turn it upside down? The entire reason that the show was so good was because of this, this, and this. And those are the things that you've decided to change. Why would you do that unless you were just trying to, garner, cheaply garner additional fans from a pre-existing fan base and then try to appeal to an entirely new fandom, only making all of the old fans very resentful. So I definitely felt strongly about this, and I was sort of complaining about it left and right. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you guys right now. But I had something happen to me, which was quite shocking, actually, for me. Anyway, it was very transformative. There was an article that was posted in our Discord, and I'm going to bring it up on screen right now. This is a news article that was written just as the introduction of Star Trek: The Next Generation was happening. The new show had been announced, the new cast had been shown, and this was an article that really drove home the disdain, the resentment of the previous generation of Star Trek fans. And I went and I read through this whole article, and I thought, my gosh, what a ridiculous bunch of nonsense this is. Like, listen to the way these guys talk. The stuff that they're saying about Next Generation. How could you be more wrong? To me, they're saying TOS can't be replaced. The only reason that the show was successful was because of that particular chemistry of characters, that the heart and soul of the show was being removed and replaced with this crappy artificial Marriott in the sky. It was just a huge thing. It was a very visceral reaction, and I stopped trying to really check in with myself, and I was like, oh my God, this is me. I'm literally I'm reading myself, but the generation that happened before this. And for me, this show is the pinnacle of all things Star Trek. Everything is to be compared to TNG. And it makes you wonder, man. Doesn't it make you wonder, what if there's a generation that feels that way about Star Trek Discovery? Doesn't that just blow your mind wide open? So it made me sort of check in with myself. And today's topic is going to be this: the difference between the generations of Star Trek, what makes it so important to you, the giant paradigm shifts that happen from generation to generation, and if that's something you can get behind or that you can recognize yourself in.
Before we dive too deep into that, I do want to ask one question, because I've never actually heard Jennifer's opinion on this. Did you have the same sort of hackles up, disdain for Discovery and Picard that Merrick and, frankly, myself both had?
That's a very good question. I would say not exactly, no. And my trepidations came from different things. So, and actually, oddly enough, this is because I started with the original series, and that was my first Star Trek, and I felt very protective of that time period. So for me, it wasn't so much the new style or the new direction necessarily the show was going in. For me, I was worried that things that were happening in Discovery specifically, because Picard's after, right? The things that were happening in Discovery, especially during that first season, that they were specifically altering things that I considered storylines, canon, parts of characters that I felt very attached to. And so that's and they did, and in the beginning I was really upset by it. And now I've kind of just gotten to the point where I just kind of ignore it. And I just don't consider it anything. I just try to separate it. But that was where my upsetness, if you want to call it that.
Okay. I was just intrigued because I'd never heard your opinion.
Yeah, for me it was how are you going to put this into that timeline? It just seemed it's such a small timeline. There's so few years. You have all of these years post Voyager. Why are you not using them? I was just frustrated.
Good question.
Which it feels like now they're taking an even bigger risk, right? Because I think I'm speaking for Merrick and I, but I think he'll agree. We're both TNG, DS9, Voyager people at heart. You've now made us defensive because you're you're changing how Trek works and what Trek is and going back in the past when you could have gone in the future, but you're also messing with TOS fans. Like, you've basically bundled up all the Star Trek fans and given all of them a potential reason to distrust, not dislike, but distrust your show from the start.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good way to put it. It sort of sets us against it from the start. And I think Jennifer that was an interesting response, because I think you're just as protective, because that's what it is. I think I'm being very protective of this thing that I love so much, and I don't want it being unraveled in some way, shape, or form. And for me, it was like a broader Star Trek thing. For you, they happen to place this show right next to it, right? And right next to your favorite thing, exactly like your show that you love. It was directly next to it and just before it, right? So it was really easy.
It was really easy to mess with that.
For continuity issues, right? For some sort of conflict, for some sort of continuity. And they did it from the get-go. You gotta know that there are people on that set whose entire job are continuity of Star Trek. And so to plop them right before... First of all, don't get me wrong. I need to say initially, I actually think that the setting was awesome. And I am not, and I'll give the caveat that I'm not as protective about TOS, right? So maybe I'm not the right person to even make that comment. But for me, it was really cool because I've always loved what they did with Captain Pike. Captain Pike was an awesome captain, great actor. I actually loved the scene and the setting and the vibe from the original pilot of the show. Remember, in case anyone isn't aware of that, the pilot was a failure, and the studio said, no, it's too cerebral, right? But my God, what did Star Trek become? It became 10 times more cerebral than TOS ever dreamed of being, and it became even more cerebral than I mean, I want to say that the pilot of TOS was literally a precursor to the rest of all of Star Trek, right? So that's what we actually ended up wanting, and so they took this character who got the shaft, and by the way, an actual tragedy, because Jeffrey Hunter, who played Pike in the original series, lost that job because it didn't work and they had to recast him. And the very next thing he did, he died on set for. So like it ended up being like a total bummer. But that character got to live on in canon because of what they did in the Menagerie episode of the original series, right? One of the greatest things I've ever seen a sci-fi show ever do. And then they decided, you know what? That's a 10-year period of time that we can mess with. And a captain that has a real place in the mythos of Star Trek, an actual captain for 10 years of the Starship Enterprise, and we're going to make a show around that. I love it. But why then are you going to give them hollow imagers on the freaking bridge of the Discovery? It's so infuriating.
I do love that they kind of address that a little bit with Pike, where he's like, get rid of this.
Yeah, and never again. And never again. He said, never on my ship ever again, or something like that. It was perfect.
It is very like hand wavy, whatever. But I agree with you. When they first had the hollow imagers there, it was upsetting because it doesn't make any sense. But I love that Pike is just
right.
Like, no,
the technology that did bother me. I remember the technology that was displayed in Discovery just was too advanced.
Oh yeah,
it made absolutely no sense.
It felt like they were just doing it for the visual effects.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And then they wave it away by saying like, oh, we'll never speak about this because we sent them to the future and we can't reveal it. But
which again, we've talked about this a little bit. I roll my eyes at this because yes, okay, I get it. Very few people are involved in it. We're gonna just like write it off as blacklisted, right? Never to be spoken again, classified forever. But how many not just life ending, but like planet ending, galaxy ending threats have we ever seen? And like they never dredge up the fact that we have technology that can literally teleport anyone to anywhere in the entire galaxy ever at any moment. It just seems extreme.
And all we need is like a little space water bear.
Yeah, but at least there's precedence for that because
big.
No, but there is precedence in Star Trek for that. In the original series, they do time travel. And then they kind of forget that they are able to do time travel because later on they're not able to fix something.
I suppose that's actually pretty fair. Like time travel has existed so many times, and yet anytime time travel could fix something,
that's one of my favorite lines.
In the original series, there's like one time in the in the first season or something, they do time travel, and it's so easy the way they do it, and then they just never talk about it again.
What's worse is the way that particular episode ends, because at the end of that episode they go, they say something to the effect of like, well, now we have this equation and we can, we have
Right.
this, we
They
can
set
do this.
themselves
And then
up,
they
yeah.
end the episode like right after saying that. And then they never bring it up again until, anybody?
Oh, it's Voyage Home?
Star Trek for the Voyage Home, because they just pull it out of a hat. All of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, in this hunk of junk Klingon bird of prey that we don't know how to fly and we can't translate, we don't know where the dilithium transfer matrix is or whatever. They're like, oh, by the way, I'm gonna start begin what is it? Entering computations for time travel formula.
Just he pulls it right out. Like there's like no.
And what's worse is it does it from memory. Doesn't Spock he just remembers it? And he goes, I don't know, I have to make a judgment. And then Kirk goes, yeah, that's great. It's gonna be fine. And then he turns to Bones and goes, I don't think the captain understands the seriousness. And he goes, no, he's just saying that he trusts more in your hunches than in another man's facts or something like that.
That's it. Yeah.
That's
It's a great line. But it is true. The continuity
that is also the
weird.
only TOS trivia I will ever get correct.
The movies? Or specifically 4?
Specifically 4. I've watched 4 so many times because I love it. I've
It's
watched
the
all
best.
the movies once, and
4 is the one
Jennifer-
I've watched on repeat,
Yeah,
that I've
exactly.
watched on a regular
Same.
basis. Yeah.
and
Most people don't even know the
Jennifer
name.
know this and both judge me for it, but I have never actually watched a full episode of the original series yet.
Oh my goodness.
I'm looking at this article. I mean, I've looked at it before, obviously, because it was shared in the Discord. But the one thing that jumped out at me this time is Dr. Crusher is played by Cheryl McFadden.
Cheryl
Gates
McFadden. Yes.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know about that.
This is one of those like gems of Star Trek, and it is perfect that it comes up right here with this particular article, because this is seriously, it literally points exactly to how everyone was feeling about The Next Generation when it came out. We venerate TNG, right? Like to us, it's like the pinnacle of all Star Trek. Like I said in the beginning of the podcast, the Trek to which all other Trek is compared, right? It just is what it is. But when the show came out, it was hated by its initial fan base. And Sci-Fi was in a really weird place at the time. They were considering the show to not only be a huge gamble, but probably banking on it being a failing one. So everyone disliked it. The initial, the only reason to make another Star Trek was to capitalize on the fandom that existed already. So TOS was very successful later in reruns. It became very successful, gained a lot of attention, and they finally started making movies. Now, this is around the time that the movies were being made. The movies, and I brought this up on the podcast the other day or the other week, but the movies were starting to make money, and they were doing, well enough, and it brought a lot of box office attention to the franchise of Star Trek. And the studio offered Gene Roddenberry the ability to come back and reprise another Star Trek, basically. But the initial fan base was like, you're only making this because the movies are being successful and you're not bringing back the original series cast to finally get the rest of their show that they were robbed of in the first place, because that's how they all felt. Like they wanted the original series back. If you read that article that I posted, my God, they felt very strongly about this.
In fact, none of the actors felt particularly good about it either. Gates McFadden had altered her name for this reason, I believe, feeling it wasn't serious enough or likely to be successful.
Yeah, I know she's done like serious theater, but
Yes.
but you were acting alongside Patrick Stewart, who is also like a very serious actor.
Did you read the article? One of the very
Yeah.
first lines was hilarious because they go, replaced by unknown British Shakespeare actor Patrick Stewart in Captain Kirk's chair is what they call it. My God, the vitriol. So he was unknown, I guess.
Well, it's funny that the news article was like bothered by him being this unknown Shakespearean actor, which is, I actually don't know what his reputation was in the
I wouldn't have
80s,
known either.
but
Yeah.
obviously it's huge now. But from what I've heard, I think it was actually in the wrap up episode they do after All Good Things, if you watch the series. Well, it's not on Netflix anymore, but on Amazon or whatever. Gene Roddenberry didn't want Patrick Stewart in because he was playing a Frenchman as a British person.
And for multiple other reasons, apparently. I think it was quite a thing.
So
That's
it's
right.
just funny that like Patrick Stewart's getting all this vitriol from both sides and is still, no questions asked, one of the greatest captains in Star Trek.
No questions at all for one of the. Absolutely.
I was gonna say, I was about to say the greatest captain, but now I know how both of us feel about Pike. So
It's a little complicated these days. Yes,
Yeah.
but Patrick Stewart and Captain Picard are absolute legend royalty. They just cannot be dethroned. It's such an important thing. It is hilarious because Patrick Stewart had such a weird experience with it too. Not he wasn't changing his name like Gates McFadden did, but
he also
refused
thought it was
to
gonna get
unpack.
canceled.
Yes, he refused to unpack his suitcase for like the first 6 weeks. He was sure one of two things were going to happen. He was either going to be replaced as Picard because he knew that they didn't like him. I mean, Gene Roddenberry was the one who didn't like him.
Which
and
is
I remember
a pretty
them
big
saying
deal
like,
if you're trying to do Star Trek.
yeah, because he was Mr. Creative Control at the time anyway. That changed fairly quickly in the first few seasons, but he definitely had, that right. And they wanted him to do it. They wanted Patrick Stewart in because he was really, really good. At least they thought that it was good. And it's funny because you go back and look at season 1, right? He's a different character. Like that was a lot of foresight and a lot of people's brains to be able to see that was going to go the way we all wanted it to go. The writers were writing him differently. He was like gruff, angry military guy who hated children. I mean, it was such a different vibe for Picard. He played him differently. Because I'm going through season 1 right now, and he was definitely an ugly bag of mostly water. I'm just going to throw that out there. He was a little ornery in the beginning. So I told you I was going to call someone that in this podcast.
You did. I'm glad it wasn't me. Thank you.
It was gonna be. It was gonna be. But Patrick Stewart jumped out. He definitely thought that he was going to be fired, or that he thought the show was going to fail, and so he really was not banking on this being a success. And much to our blessing, I guess, it all ended up working out and he ended up staying, but nobody thought this was going to go well. And the funny thing about that, the other funny thing about that article was that they said that Spock, right? Kirk was, Stewart was sitting in Captain Kirk's chair. And then also the beloved Vulcan Spock was being replaced by a blind man seeing through robot eyes.
Which
Jordy, what?
still doesn't make sense because clearly Data is the replacement for Spock. But whatever.
Exactly.
But I guess if you're writing this after seeing, maybe they saw like a preview of the pilot or first episode or whatever.
I guess maybe so.
But yeah, I was actually just noticing that for the first time was that they called LeVar Burton the new Spock in the
new
caption.
Spock. Oh my god! And it's so crazy that's what they ended up doing. I actually sat and thought about that after I read that article. That the role of science officer, I mean, that just like fundamentally changed. There was no science officer. There's no science officer ever again. In fact, that got completely removed.
Well, yeah, it gets mostly removed, except I'm pretty sure it's because, and they get into this, I think in season 6 or 7. There's too many different sciences on the Enterprise, the Galaxy class, to have one science officer.
Astrometrics and like geology.
Well, there's what's her
I was
name?
gonna say,
the piano playing episode with what's her name?
Oh, the best captain's wife ever. Like
Yes.
I never root for him to get married, like to get with a girl. Like it's always awkward to me. But because Vosh
she was
sucks.
so good.
But she was so good, man. If she ended up staying on it as a permanent character and as a relationship, I would have loved it. I like their relationship better than Beverly and him for sure.
For sure.
Ah.
And it's also the only person he's ever shared his flute song with.
Which is so meaningful, right? So like,
I actually have a YouTube clip of them playing together saved because I just like it so much.
it's such a good scene. It's such a good scene where that's where she finds the acoustically perfect spot on the ship, right?
Yep.
It's so good. I actually read an article, or not an article, it was an interview with some of the writers who were talking about, the producers who were talking about how when you're making an episode of television, and you may not realize at the time that the television you're making is like, they didn't know that they were going to be making this 7-season long thing that was going to spawn how many spin-offs or whatever. Like this mythos that they were creating just never ends, and it's amazing. And sometimes the writers are like just sit in a writing room, right? They're just drinking coffee, like, hey, what would happen if Picard lived an entire life in an episode? Wouldn't that be cool? And everyone's like, yeah. And then they write it. And then at the end of it, they kind of, there's a bunch of episodes like that where they get to the end and they're like, well, shit, guys, that was a good episode, but I think that may have made a longer lasting impact on our character than we initially, hoped for, especially with such an episodic television frame that they were using before, right? So that traumatized and changed not Patrick Stewart, but Picard I don't want to speak for you, Sir Stewart, but Picard for sure. And it was one of those amazing things where they were like, oh crap, they brought this up in the interview. They were like, that was a heavier thing than we intended. But
then they did it again. Like they did a similar storyline again, though, about living out an entire life, and they did it in Deep Space Nine.
Yes, different group of writers had
and
the same mistake. Exactly what I was going to bring up next.
Right, but arguably, in the case of Next Generation with Picard, I feel like they. First of all, it was maybe you could say less traumatizing, and secondly, they do bring it up later on in other episodes, and they bring it back and things like that. But poor O'Brien, it's like he's just expected to be this rock solid person that like he goes through so much suffering, and they don't really talk about it ever.
No, well, you're totally right.
I mean, and that was just the theme with O'Brien, though, right? Like,
O'Brien must suffer. They literally coined them, like, it wasn't us. The studio coined them O'Brien Must Suffer episodes. And there are a bunch of them, guys. Like, go and count. There's a ton. Poor O'Brien's got it rough.
I can't drag us into the documentary because we're saving that. And I do want to talk a lot about it. But I love that when in the documentary, they were like, if we got to kill someone, I was initially thinking O'Brien.
How freaking dare.
Immediately jump in.
The Federation would fall and crumble to bits without Miles Edward
one would know
O'Brien.
how to repair anything.
No, for sure. They need him. He's a legend. But to your point, Jennifer, that's exactly what they did. Like, and to your point and to their credit, I should say, because they ended up realizing the weight of what they did, and then they ended up deciding that they needed to bring that back, and it got brought back multiple times. And you see that flute, man, has always made such an impact on him, and was the key to his heart, so to speak, right? To unlock that with his relationship with her. It was really good. It was really good. And fun fact, by the way,
explanation of like how meaningful it was to share that.
Yes. And he was very like close to his chest, right? He's like, I don't share my music with anyone. But it was so important. But this is a fun fact for everybody. When That's a Wrap happened, which was, that's what they called it, when they finally decided to wrap up everything in the studio at Paramount lot. Everything Star Trek was being auctioned, sold, or thrown away. It was finally time to get it done with it. They were never going to bring that stuff back ever again. So they sold it. And they sold that flute
for something like over $40,000, a lot of money.
And it doesn't even work. It's not a working flute. It's just like a little straw.
Oh my God. I just Googled it. It went for $48,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, dude, for a little flute.
Non-working flute.
Yes. And as a true Star Trek fan, I'm going to tell you guys right now, if I was a millionaire for anything, I would have bought the flute.
I would have bought
$48,000 for sure. You take that money from me.
There's only one other show that I would have bid a lot of money for, but yeah, the flute is a good one.
Wait, what show?
Oh, well, this is just sharing another obsession of mine. But do you know the show Psych?
Yes. Oh, I like Psych.
That's a good show. My mom loves it. They auctioned off the Blueberry after the last episode.
No way. How much did that go for?
Not $48,000. I think the last bid I heard on it was like $15,000 or something.
Oh wow.
But it was, and James Roday and Dule Hill both autographed the I don't know what you call them, the little pull down sun blocky things in the front. Why am I having so much trouble with words?
Sun visor?
I guess, yeah, sun visors.
I don't know what to call it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, if you got that much money, dude, like, I like collecting stuff. Look behind me, man. Like, there's so much stuff. And if I had money,
it's such a cool thing to own. Like, I guess you don't really care if it works or not. You just want to show it off. It's not like you want to play the flute regularly.
It's the sentimentality. He held it and pretended to play it on set, and that's everything, right? That's amazing.
So
on another note of that, Ben
he was
Stiller
never actually playing it.
No, he's never played it. That was just overlaid with somebody else playing flute behind him. I hate to burst bubbles across the globe to all of our viewers.
Wait, Riker was actually playing the trombone though, right?
I'm pretty sure Frakes plays trombone. I think.
Yeah, that's why I think
put
he
that
does.
in the show because of him.
I hope he's actually playing the trombone because I've always thought that was true.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he does. And Frakes is amazing. I love that man. But yeah, the flute. Oh man. So there's trivia all over the place, man. Ben Stiller is an enormous Star Trek fan, if anyone doesn't know that. He actually owns the Gorn head. He has the head of the Gorn from the Gorn episode.
Like the
the actual rubber Gorn helm. Head. He loves Star Trek, and I love that he does. Also, the son in The Inner Light, the episode The Inner Light, Patrick Stewart's son plays his son in that episode.
Oh, right.
Really
I do
awesome.
remember that one, yeah.
Yeah. So if I had $1 billion, man, I would buy all that stuff. Are you kidding?
Oh, for sure.
That's what I would spend my money on. And then I'd be broke again and just be a really awesome
I think
nerd.
The only other thing that competes with the flute for what I want to bid on is, do you remember in Take Me Out to the Hollow Suites, they signed the baseball at the end?
Oh my God. No, I would trade my wife for that baseball.
What?
Sorry.
I love you, Eddie. No, seriously, it breaks my heart because when I was a kid, I'm so dead serious sad about this. When I was a kid and I watched and loved that show, I dreamed of grabbing that baseball because you can actually buy baseballs online that have like the chevron, like the Star Trek, the emblem, and bringing it to conventions and getting all of the DS9 crew to sign it. And then I watched it not be possible, and then even less possible, and then even less possible. Like as people are getting too old to pass away, it is devastating. But like if I could have anything, there would be nothing I would want more than that. Absolutely tip top of my desire would be that one.
Is for sure the best.
It's actually good. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yes. So here's the thing. So just to bring us back to the topic,
Sorry.
I love those sort of like tangents that we go on, but the separation between generations really hit me harder than I thought that it would. And Jennifer, I want to give you an opportunity before I move on to this next section to explain how it was to be a TOS fan when we got together and consider yourself a real Star Trek fan, but not know anything about the golden era that I liked. A lot of Star Trek is sort of rewritten and written over in a weird way. I really feel like it replaces it.
I think part of that was when I was watching the original series and I was watching the original series movies, I did have a concept as a kid that there were Next Generation episodes, and I think I did see some of them out of order. But I knew the characters somewhat. I just didn't really remember any of the plot lines because maybe I had only seen them once, and not all of them, certainly. I think for me, it was fine because it was so far in the future. So, TOS had its time frame, it had its movies, it had its characters, and they were all kind of like safely encapsulated in this bubble as far as I was concerned. So when I then watched Next Gen, I kind of got to experience it now, which I think, and this is probably because I've watched other modern television over the years, that has made me be able to appreciate Next Gen and even Deep Space Nine much more now. If I think about it, had I watched those shows as a child when I was watching the original series also, I may not have enjoyed it as much as enjoying it now, like when we were starting to watch them. I think watching Next Gen and especially Deep Space Nine as an adult, I think I got to enjoy it a lot better. I think I would have found them too incongruous to each other than the original series, like when in my child brain, or like preteen, like when I was watching TOS. I think if I had just like thrown Deep Space Nine into that, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much as I did later as an adult. Because I do remember Deep Space Nine, knowing of it and feeling like, oh, that doesn't look like Star Trek to me, and then I just didn't watch it.
Interesting. I mean, that sounds like all three of us kind of had the same reaction to at least DS9.
I was just gonna say,
but like what I'd never thought about is what Jennifer said. Experiencing how modern TV works also kind of reshaped how I perceived DS9. I mean, in addition to what Merrick has said before, the fact that we can kind of binge watch it now because it's streaming.
Yep.
But like modern TV has just changed to accommodate the serialized television rather than episodic television.
Yeah. They don't need to reintroduce
I actually don't know
everything.
what modern TV does anymore because I haven't had cable in like 10 years. But
Yeah,
Well,
actual television, I have no idea. But like these
Yeah.
big series that come out, like I'm always up on those, like the new Lord of the Rings or Stranger Things or
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones,
That
all
kind
those kind of things. Like we watch those kind of things. They're hyper serialized at this point. There has to be a like what happened. Like you would only see what happened last time on Star Trek on a two-parter, or more likely on a season finale to a season premiere.
Yeah.
That was like
Whereas
the big
DS9
way.
kind of had those a little bit more regularly. Not often, but
Maybe
well, I
not
guess
often
they actually
enough.
had a lot of multi-part episodes.
Yeah, the problem with okay, so here's the problem with DS9, and I adore that show. For those of you guys who don't know, it's easily my favorite. I'm a Niner for life. That is going to be my favorite show to the end of time. Every time I think maybe something else, I watch it again, and I'm like, no, of course it is. It's my absolute favorite, and so I adore that show. But it was very much. Did anyone here watch X-Files back in the day? Did you watch X-Files a long time ago? It was another show.
I've seen like
yeah.
my dad and stepmom really liked X-Files, so I saw it, but I didn't watch it.
Okay, so X-Files was around the same time in the 90s. It was doing the same sort of thing in the same sort of way. The difference is that it got a bigger, wider audience just because of like it not being Star Trek. I think it just became trendier, so people were okay with it. But it basically did the same thing where they would do two different kinds of episodes that had almost nothing to do with each other. There was the progression of the plot episodes, right? The conspiracy episodes, which was government conspiracy and aliens. And then there was the monster of the week episodes. And they interspersed them all over the place. So you didn't know which one you were going to get. Next week and for the next 3 weeks, monsters of the week. And then all of a sudden they were going to progress the story. And that is exactly what DS9 did. And people were just not used to that. But in addition to them not being used to serialized television at all to begin with, right? 90s. It was the era of the sitcom. Every sitcom was like a reset button at the very end of every episode. Whatever happened, no matter how big and bad it was, even if somebody died, right? Seriously, no joke. So like an actor had to leave the show and they died, they would hit a reset button afterwards and everything started fresh the next week as if nothing happened. That's how this has always been done in the 90s and before. And that's what people expected. The problem is that not only were people not used to watching TV in such a linear way, and you couldn't binge them if you missed it, if you missed that week's episode, you were just kind of screwed. Not only that, but the whole idea of a what happened last time on Star Trek, whatever the show is, like the concept of showing you a recap didn't work because the last progression of the story was like 8 episodes ago or more. Like, so it wasn't what happened last time. So you had to be like, that happened last season, you know? So it was a totally different format. No one was ready for that. DS9 was dramatically ahead of its time. So, being like such a diehard fan of the golden era of Trek, when Discovery and Enterprise came out, I found myself incredibly resentful, less willing to like the shows because of how much they were willing to move away from the tone, right? The tonal shift between those generations made a very clear dichotomy. And I found myself being the grumpy old man that was like, how dare you? Get off my lawn. Don't change my Star Trek. All these things. But then we came up with this article that kind of shows the fan reaction, the experience of the pre-existing fandom when Next Generation first came out, right? 1987. Here we are. This is showing the cast, showing the vitriol, not just from the writer of this article, but by the entire pre-existing fandom. They were very upset. And I read this whole thing going, oh my God, this is ridiculous. How could anyone think this? And then I just saw myself in it like a little bit, right? I was like, oh my God, I'm the next generation of people that are like, how dare you to this next generation of Star Trek?
Well, it's true because Merrick, if you think about it, like what you said, that the tonal shift, right, for things like Discovery, when Discovery came out, the tonal shift between that and the previous Star Treks. If I really check in with myself, the tonal shift between the original series and Next Generation could arguably be just as stark of a difference. It's just that you're so used to the Next Generation, and now at this point I am as well, that it kind of combines into it, into TOS, but they are vastly different shows.
From TOS to TNG?
Yeah.
Of course it is. I think the entire, the entire motivating factor of not only the show but the ship, Starfleet in its entirety. I think the entire what is it, modus operandi or whatever. Like the whole thing is completely different. The entirety of the Prime Directive, which is a great topic for a podcast, by the way. All of this is completely different. If you go, for most of us who grew up watching TNG and DS9 and Voyager, Azure here, Science Officer Azure is the perfect example of this. This guy knows a ton about Star Trek, just like me, but has never seen a full episode of the original series. And I would love to actually stream. We should do a watch party, man, of you watching some TOS, because I think you'll be baffled. I think going the opposite direction is just as fascinating. If you go backwards, you're like, oh my God, the words that you're going to utter are, this isn't Star Trek. That's what it's going to feel like, which is, of course, crazy. And probably, I'm just supposing right now, because I have actually gotten into some debates with people. I won't lie. It's very true. I've gotten into some, certain things that I felt very safe saying in a room full of Star Trek fans, like, oh, this new Star Trek, it can't compare. The tone isn't there. The altruism isn't there. The optimism isn't there. They take all of these things, they make them negative. I watch an episode of TNG, or even the original series. I'm going to include that in this as well, or DS9 or Voyager or Enterprise. And I end up finishing an episode. I've talked to Azure about this before, and I'm like, man, they just almost got eaten by a giant space alien, or they just spent 2 episodes trying not to get assimilated by the Borg. But holy crap, do I wish I was on that ship. I want to be with these guys. These guys are family. They're my family. They just don't know it. And I want to be on that ship and be part of that. And that feeling is just not there in this new Star Trek. It isn't there at all. And I get very upset. And I say that out loud. And there is a new generation of Star Trek fan out there that is like, what? This show is great. It is amazing. Look how progressive. Look how relatable it is to modern politics. Look at like all these things that it is changing the world in this great way. I have literally had these discussions. So as strongly as I feel that tonal shift, that generational gap, shall we say, just making us look a little old here. But I mean, like it's real in real life, and it's just as real in the Star Trek fandom.
And I'm gonna use this as my segue to the point that I warned Merrick that I wanted to make.
We're ending the stream right now, guys.
Oh no! So the transporter problem. No, I'm kidding.
No, we really are.
Merrick will actually kick me off the podcast. No, I think the big shift, and again, this also makes me sound like a grumpy old man because it's me talking down to the new Treks outside of Strange New Worlds. Obviously, I love Strange New Worlds.
The savior.
But there's a quote, and again, this is the second time I've brought up the DS9 documentary, What We Left Behind, that we will talk about more fully on a future podcast.
A whole podcast.
Ira Behr was talking about Michael Piller, who was a big part of the writing staff starting in, I forget which season of TNG. Mm-hmm. And going forward through DS9, I think he also worked on Voyager. He was also the one, I believe, who started the sort of open door policy for submitting scripts that let whoever submit ideas for scripts and
which
plots
shaped
to the show.
Not only lives, but the entirety of, the majority of TNG. I mean,
I was going to say it resulted in some
beyond.
of the top rated episodes of the series. Anyway,
yes,
but he. According to Ira Behr, when he was like kind of memorializing Michael Piller, who unfortunately passed away in like 2005, said that in the writing room, Michael Piller once said that plot was always secondary and that the plot only existed to explain and to reveal characters. And you can really feel that, especially in DS9, right? Like DS9,
God, yes.
I think did more for individual character focus than any other Star Trek.
I agree.
But
Easy.
I think and Strange New Worlds again is a little bit separate from this, but Picard and Discovery kind of lack that. They're so serialized and so focused on the plot that it's not that you lose the characters, it's just that they might develop as a result of the plot, but that's the reverse of what you feel in DS9 and even Voyager and TNG.
I think that is a phenomenal point. That is really, really good, because even if they cross, right? Even if like one motivates the other, and then in the other series of shows, it's the other motivating the other, and it sort of crosses. The end result is dramatically different and can be totally felt. It's utterly different. Even in TNG, right? We'll get to DS9 in a second because I agree. I think that's the absolute pinnacle of what you're talking about. But even in TNG, which actually speaks more to its ability to do this because of the constraints that they're in a completely episodic television show, right? This is not serialized. This is something that they do. They kind of do hit the reset button at the end of every episode. And yet, these characters grow, evolve, exchange interaction with each other in such a profound way that this is what I'm talking about. I think that really lends, I think that was the perfect segue, because it really does lend to that feeling that you know these people separate from whatever trauma is going on in the show, right? I mean, that's what it really comes down to.
And sometimes I just feel like we don't quite get that with the newer style of storytelling.
Because I want to get around to the fact, and I hope we get to wrap up with this before we end, that I don't hate new Trek. I have gone through a journey.
And that journey continues. I definitely find myself reacting negatively to all new Trek, and I love so much of it now, so I think it's probably good to self-evaluate with that kind of thing.
To bring it back, though, to like what you said before, the fact that these are generational shows, and this is reflecting our times, right? I mean, it was interesting. Something you said before made me think the way you see the characters in Discovery, and it is through things like crying and depression and all of this stuff. And then I thought to myself, how did I used to see the characters of the original series? And I can tell you, it was nothing but positive, and some might fault it for that, but it was Spock and Bones and Kirk, around the water cooler, which was the captain's chair.
At the end of every episode.
Laughing, and maybe Spock would give Bones a weird look, or Bones would give Spock a weird look, and then they would laugh. And so obviously there was nothing.
One-liner at the end of every episode.
Right.
The feel-good one-liner at the end of every episode. It was a very era-based thing.
Exactly. And the feel-good one-liner, it produces nothing but just a little positive endorphin boost vibe, right? And then you think oh, these characters are like that friend of yours that always just has something nice or pleasant to say, and they're super jovial. And then you could argue that then in Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, it kind of emerged. It grew up. It wasn't the 60s anymore. It wasn't even the 70s anymore. It was 90s, right?
I was gonna say, it wasn't the 80s either.
Really?
Well, I guess it was the 80s.
87, yeah.
No, late 80s or 90s, and that was a new version, and it was a new time in history. It was a new time in our society, and I think it does reflect that. And as much as we may not like it as much because maybe it's not as positive, I think Discovery and Picard, if I really take an objective view to this and try to take out my own personal nostalgia and emotions from it, I think it really does reflect the time. I think a lot of people now, we are much more in touch with our feelings, whether that's good or bad, and I think a lot of that stuff is at the forefront. People have therapists now. People know that they're depressed.
That was actually an evolution of the 90s itself. The 90s man was in touch with his feelings. I mean, that was the progressive, the social progression of the era, was this new man in touch with his feelings, and that they literally installed a counselor on the bridge of the Enterprise was indicative of the time, for sure. And I think when we talk about the generational shifts between eras of shows, you're right, and you spoke to that a moment ago. It is not just a generational gap between these TV shows, but it's expressing the generational changes and gaps between actual generations of people. And back in that era, the 60s, that was an expectation of every show. That was the end of MASH. That was the end of I Love Lucy. That was the end of Star Trek. It was just some sort of feel-good quip at the end where everyone goes, ah, and then that's the end of the episode. It just felt good, and you were only supposed to feel good.
Right.
In TNG, we really thought, right? We got to question some things. And and this is where I really lose this debate, because I can lose it with myself. I really can. I've argued with myself about this, and this is actually how I end up losing this debate. In modern Trek, in Discovery and Picard, one of my biggest complaints is always the stuff that they're tackling, the way that they're tackling it. Nothing can ever be a good guy. There's no such thing as good guys anymore, right? Like Picard, or in Star Trek The Next Generation, Starfleet was all altruism, right? Even with the occasional evil admiral, right? Which we had a bunch of. I mean, the idea, we were just constantly talking about the idealism and the morality that was intrinsic to Starfleet and the Federation. It could do no wrong. Like an individual could maybe do wrong, but we're going to self-correct, and we are the good guys. We experience strife, prejudice, and immoral actions through the lens of an evolved group of people meeting these errors in behavior in other planets, in aliens, right? This is how we did this. In modern 2020s, right? The way that we experience stuff, like the challenge of Star Trek has always been to try to reflect modern day problems and deal with it in the future and try to put a mirror to society, right? That's kind of what it does. And so it's really upsetting to me when I'm like, man, why are you making Federation bad? Like, that's what it's always been about. It's been an optimistic view of the future. And yet you have Picard leaving the Federation. He left them because they wouldn't help refugees. I mean, like exactly what was going on in like 2019 or whatever when they were making the show. It's exactly what we were dealing with. Can't trust any authority. The government is corrupt, all this stuff. It was really this negative view, but like it, in a way, and I don't like this point, but it is real. It is diligently reflecting modern societal takes in progressive social thinking. And it is hard for me to stomach that. And I know that's also because I'm old.
Well, but again, like they could have made it appeal to you more by having people helping the refugees and like reflecting on the people who had refused, blah, blah, blah. Like basically taking the opposite side of that.
Right, yeah. Which they've always done in the past, where there's no reason why we can't show current times in the lens of not futuristic humans, but rather aliens.
Well, and what I found most disappointing, and again, so Merrick mentioned it, I just recently rewatched all of Discovery. It's like my second or third watch through now. I think parts of it are good sci-fi. Like it's a like an appealing storyline. It's interesting, but the Star Trek-ish-ness of it, that was not good. Cut that in post. But the essence of Star Trek from it is lost a little bit in the sense that there's like Merrick said, there's not that optimism, and I felt like they kept missing the mark. Like, okay, season 1 ended, there was this galaxy level threat of Federation level threat of the Klingon War, and okay, we resolved that, and I was like, oh, cool, like we're gonna have a couple hopeful episodes. Nope. Okay, season 2 starts, immediate new galaxy level threat of AI taking over. Okay, but now we've jumped to the future. This is going to be so cool, right? Like things will be hopeful now.
Galaxy level threat.
We've left this level. Oh no, sorry. The burn has happened and everything's awful and the Federation doesn't exist. The coolest moment in season 3, by the way, is when Burnham commissions that guy who's been working at like the transmission or like communications desk for like his entire life.
The only Federation guy ever left, right? Yeah. He's like sitting on this thing. Yeah.
And he has never had contact with like the main Federation, but he just maintains his hopefulness. That is the coolest moment in Discovery. I love it.
Because it was hopeful. Because he felt hope for a second.
And because he was like, hey, I'm not actually an officer. I've done this for like my entire life. For 40 years, I've gotten up and done this. And Burnham commissions him because she's an officer and can do that.
And that right there is a Star Trek moment, dude. That's a Star Trek moment. That's exactly what we like.
So rare.
They are.
That is such a great Star Trek moment because that just shows it really is about like the individual person. Like that person was in almost like a little bubble, a time capsule of his own making, where he was still hopeful.
Yeah. I agree. And again, I just said a bunch of really negative things about Discovery. I think Discovery's a fine show. It's just not my idea of a Star Trek show.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say, though, with all of these arguments that we've been having or talking about Discovery and this modern Trek, though, Strange New Worlds has taken this and somehow tied it through. Like, I feel like it has put a string from itself all the way back to the original series. In a way that is incredibly it's just very good. Like
Strange New Worlds?
It's amazing how they were able to accomplish that, because all of the arguments that we've had for why we're not maybe enjoying some of the modern Trek as much, they fix that because it is modern. It is the modern times. It is reflecting the modern times, and yet somehow they were able to capture the original series, which is quite impressive.
Yeah, I gotta say refreshing, and I've got to agree. I think Strange New Worlds, the perfect descriptor of it is refreshing.
Also, WorldMind from our friends over at the Live Long and Prosper podcast said,
that moment brought a tear to my eye. And he was talking about the moment that you were talking about, that hopeful moment in season 3 when you end up meeting that guy. That is something that, and Azure's heard me say this a bunch, and I think it's incredibly profound for me, is do you know how many times Michael Burnham has cried in like, so I don't mean to pick on him, but like the drama and the devastation of crying in Discovery and all of the depressing, sad, tear-jerky moments that are trying to happen in Star Trek Picard, of which there are almost as many. There's just a lot of that big depression stuff that I struggle with. That to me is just not right. I love what you said a moment ago, that you said you brought a tear to your eye, because do you know how many Star Trek is an emotional show? It always has been. And it does get you to feel choked up. You know how many times I have felt choked up in Star Trek? Thousands. But it's always not because some sort of trauma has happened. Every single time it has been because of that inspiration. When you have been moved, right? Moved emotionally by something profound and inspirational. That is how Star Trek touches you, right? That's how it touches me. I guess I'll just talk for myself, but those are those moments. How many there are scenes where I know all the lines to, that even just like belting out the lines, I get choked up, because like, man, those are profoundly impactful scenes that stick with you forever. I can read you the speech from a Measure of a Man, right? Our mission is to seek out new life. Well, there it sits.
Sorry, I'm picturing you tearing up while reciting Felis Catus. Which, for anyone who hasn't heard yet, Merrick knows the entire Felis Catus poem.
He does, yes.
I do. Ode to Spot is one of my absolute favorites. Felis Catus is her taxonomic nomenclature. An endothermic quadruped, carnivorous by nature. Oh, and by the way, just because you brought it up, I have to say it. I'm just going to give them enough crap, because the poem is recited twice in the show. Once by Data himself at a poetry reading, and another when the computer goes awry and Data is all over the ship.
Say, and I have a correction to you, but I'll let you finish.
Oh, okay. Well, when they actually recite it, they both recite it wrong. At least tonally, they recite it wrong. Incorrectly. They recite it as a question mark. They're as if they're addressing Felis Catus, and they're asking whether or not those things are true.
And you're absolutely correct about that, but I think the second time it happens, Riker is correct, because he's literally reciting Data's poem. So if Data got it wrong, Riker should get it wrong.
Does that mean that in Data's files there's a question mark and a comma?
I think so, and I agree with you. That's incorrect because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
This
is how big of a nerd I am, you guys.
They get it wrong is fine.
Yeah, we'll give Riker a pass, but Data of all people. Anyway. So I do love memorizing random Star Trek things, and Ode to Spot is one of my absolute favorites. So that's what makes that scene in season 3 of Discovery so powerful, because it makes you feel that hope. It is a glimmer of what we had felt in Star Trek, right? That feeling that we all know, and damn it, Jim, everybody knows it. If you're a longtime Star Trek fan, this is a shared experience, man. If you love Star Trek, there's no way that you don't know what I'm saying. There's this feeling where you stand up, and for once in the history of ever, in any media form ever, you are proud to be human. You know, like, God, that is a profound statement to make. And there's so many moments in Star Trek that really make you feel that, and you feel inspired, and you feel hopeful about the future in a world, and especially a genre of media that is so tempted to make you feel the very opposite of hope, right? Just great despair about our future. That's sort of like its thing. And so in season 3, you get that moment, and then you expect and hope that it builds from that. I think every time, like, I don't know if you guys do this, I infer so much into the writers and developers and producers of these shows. I'm like, oh, well, everyone hated that, and everyone knows that. And so, like, there's some lessons that were learned here. Clearly, next season, they're like, screw this. We got in too much trouble. We're going to go to the future now and start the show over. And it's going to be great from now on. But it just never quite goes that way.
Well, and that's what made the jump to the future so disappointing, is like, oh, things have crumbled. And then you get that hopeful moment. And then it's kind of back to... Well, I guess season 3 is mostly about figuring out the burn, and that's kind of okay and whatever.
Is it though, when you finally find out what it is?
No,
It's such the
hilariously
letdown.
disappointing.
I was so willing to give it some credit. I was like, oh man, this is a big mystery. I hate it. I really hate that you got rid of warp. And if you were going to get rid of warp, then why not tackle the whole like warp eroding subspace thing, which we definitely had in canon, but instead you're going to do some other giant thing. And then it was like a single stupid thing that related directly to the people that were already on the show, which made no sense at all. And they're just, it was such lazy writing.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
the Kelpian who got sad. Well, scared.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yes.
no, but like,
Well, at least the theme is still intact.
I don't-
They're still focusing on like the internal mind.
well, but I don't
Yeah.
want to get too far into that. But then they solve that. All right, great. Things are hopeful again. We go to season 4. They even open with a chase scene, like in the Kelvin timeline movies, like they're running through the forest.
Yeah,
and I was like,
Kelvin number 2. Yeah,
yeah,
Into
and I was
Darkness.
like, oh, we're gonna get back to they're just exploring new worlds because they have dilithium again. They're not worried about it all blowing up. This is
They're
gonna
giving
be
it
so
away.
cool. And within like one episode, they're like, oh, here's the new galaxy-ending threat. And I was like, man, come on.
I know.
Can we not just have like cool scientific exploration of space?
Well, and to their credit, right? And this is the craziest thing, because I just said a moment ago that I always try to like infer that these guys are like me and that the producers of the show are fans and watching Twitter and listening to podcasts like LLAP and of course the Night Shift, but of course they're not doing that. So they don't know that people feel this way. But for Kurtzman, I mean, because here's the thing, they came out with Strange New Worlds, right? We made that happen. By the way, as the fandom,
not,
like
I was gonna say not the three of us.
just
but
the three of us are responsible for Strange New Worlds. So you're welcome, internet.
I yelled a lot of good things about Pike, so maybe I helped.
I did
There you
too,
go.
and I signed the petition and everything. I was super into this, and it was really important for me to try to do something towards it because I was feeling very down about Star Trek as a whole. And Strange New Worlds came out to, I mean, you literally said exactly that, right? What happened to like weekly planetary scientific exploration? It's exactly, they even named it Strange New Worlds. They're just going to Strange New Worlds again. They brought back exactly what we wanted. They gave us the exact crew we wanted, and it was still Kurtzman. So obviously he is listening. He does know what at least a portion of the fandom feels. And at least at this point now, I think they thought to themselves, we're going to keep doing whatever we're going to do with Discovery and Picard.
And honestly,
And then we're
how
going
can
to
you
make a
fault
show
them?
for the other group of people that are not happy. But what was so crazy is that how profoundly beloved by every group Strange New Worlds is. I've yet to find a single Trekkie, and I've talked Trek with people all the time. I've not found a single person who is a big Star Trek fan, okay? And just because somebody plays Star Trek Online does not make them a Star Trek fan. There are people in here who are like Strange New Worlds sucks, and I'm like, okay, what Star Trek do you like? They're like, they all suck. I'm like, okay, I have nothing for you. But every Star Trek fan that I know has liked Strange New Worlds, and so it's an encouraging place.
I'm happy that Strange New Worlds happened. Any
Amen,
animosity or negativity that I felt around Discovery has kind of faded away because Strange New Worlds exists now. So I can just kind of take them as separate entities. With that said,
Yeah.
it still irks me about some of the canon disruptions that Discovery did to the original series canon.
Yeah.
But
Can I give a couple of cool nods though? When I was saying the things that I do like about Discovery, Filippo Giorgio, I loved. I even listen. I'm a Jason Isaacs fan, so I was a fan.
Oh, he
of
was
Lorca.
a very good. Yeah,
I just
let's-
adore
let's
Lorca.
find Prime Lorca.
Prime Lorca. Can I get hashtag Prime Lorca in the chat? Find Lorca, Prime Lorca, please. I'm so into that. I want that to happen so bad. So Lorca was also great. And my two favorite episodes of the entire show were the Harry Mudd episode, which I thought was phenomenal and was awesome to see
That
Harry
was
Mudd come back.
great.
That was great.
That was a safe choice. That
Hey,
was,
what?
that was a safe choice because
Was it a
Harry
safe
Mudd
choice?
is such a separate entity.
He was beloved. And they actually did
And
that
Rainn
awesome.
Wilson was such a good Harry Mudd choice.
Oh, absolutely. He was awesome. And also, when they dropped the Guardian of the Galaxy, I lost my literal mind. When the voice came booming in, I am the Guardian of Forever. I literally just lost it. That was
one of the
moment.
best scenes. That was one of the best
Oh,
scenes of
dude,
Discovery.
I replayed it. I rewound it like 3 times just to hear the Guardian.
There
That
was
was-
so much
sorry.
potential there. They could have done so much with that.
Azure
That's
has
another-
no attachment to that at all.
Well, I was gonna
no,
say, as a
Azure.
non-TOS fan though, that's the guy who sends Giorgio back to like relive some of her mirror universe time.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
It's the portal, but he comes out as an actual dude who's very nicely dressed.
And,
He's
and
got
like
like a
just
great
reading
Doctor Who
newspaper,
outfit on.
which I love.
Yes, yes. So good. And what you don't know is that is a throwback to one of the most beloved and maybe most critically acclaimed, like the best writing episode of the original series. It's not fun at all. It's not Trouble with Tribbles by a long shot. It is a drama. It is heavy. It is depressing, but amazing. Even me, who came to TOS late and had a rough time getting into it, that's a good episode. And that was The Guardian, The Edge of Forever. And man, they dropped that out of nowhere in Disco, and it was really good.
You know, you just said that the Guardian episode there's so much drama there, right? And it's not an easy watch. But I think what is so nice about it, and with Star Trek in general, except for maybe some of the new Trek, they still had some of the funniest lines and some of the funniest scenes are in that episode. So they mixed.
Wait, in which episode?
In The Guardian.
Oh, the ears.
Yes.
Yeah, he's talking about the ears. Oh, I got my ears caught in a rice picker, or something.
That's what they were playing. Remember the game that they were playing? Wasn't that?
Was that wasn't Fizbin?
Was it not?
No,
Oh, okay,
Fizbin
fine.
was the gangster planet.
But the ears definitely.
Which was hilarious, by the way. There's an alien planet that got like some novel about like 1920s gangsters, and they thought it was a book from above, and they modeled their entire society after it. So like they are 1920s gangsters all over the planet, basically.
And they have
that's
everything.
a hilarious
Like their
episode.
entire government is run on that.
Real quick, since we talked about putting a counselor on the bridge kind of thing,
Yeah.
the relationship between Stamets and Culber is incredible. And also Hugh Culber as Doctor
Culber.
and then eventually counselor,
I adore him.
essentially, is incredibly good.
I love him in real life too. He's just a
Yes.
really nice guy. I just like, he's got good energy. And by the way, one of the greatest scenes in that whole show was them just standing at the sink brushing their teeth. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
That was such a good scene. And I think it's funny because we were talking about Deep Space Nine. I never actually got to go back and praise Deep Space Nine and the character development and its own level of progression that it had. But one of the things, since you just recently finally watched the What We Left Behind documentary, you got to see. I finally get to bring this stuff up, like the whole thing about how well they did or how well they didn't do in terms of being progressive and like the regrets they have about LGBT, that in general, Star Trek is super progressive and super, evolutionary. Like they evolve our society, right? Through media, except they've always had a failing in the LGBT arena. That's always been not a complete failing, right? And in fact, he actually goes in great length about hilarious things about that. They're like, we did this, and then he goes back and says, nah, scratch that last one. We didn't do anything.
I
with
actually
LGBT.
loved that part where they were like, well, you had this episode and this episode, and those were really encouraging. And he's like, yeah, but we should have done way more.
We didn't do enough, right?
Yeah.
But then he goes, okay, I'll go back and give us an X. We didn't do that. He goes, well, that's a little too harsh too. We did a little bit, but we just didn't do enough. But I loved that. That is the one thing that Discovery really gets to wear on its sleeve, man. That is a real badge that Discovery will always have that nothing else can take away from it. It was finally the very first Star Trek in 50 years of Star Trek championing, minority causes and progressive social norms and all these things. They finally cracked open the just having a homosexual relationship on the frickin' ship. And not only did they do that scene, I think, just really embodied it, right? They normalized the crap out of it. They just sat
it
there
was
were
just
having
such
to
a
brush their
normal
teeth.
real life moment.
Yes, dude. To me, that was like good writing. That was good writing. I wish that the tone stayed the same, because guess what happened from that moment? The world exploded. Everything went crazy. Freaking people died. They came back from the dead. Like, we didn't like each other. Like, you can't allow character progression in the chaos that exists in that story of that show.
Although I do actually think bringing Hugh back and him trying to deal with like this life-altering experience was also actually pretty well written.
It was
Like, he
good
sits
for
down and
his
talks-
character, I guess, but it was hard to get through.
Like, oh, for sure. But I actually liked that he didn't just like. I was worried that they were going to bring him back and it would just be normal, and I kind of liked that they addressed like, I don't know who I am anymore kind of thing.
I wish they never killed him at all. I think that was like a crazy
for sure.
side plot,
Would have been-
extreme thing. Not only is this weird mycelial network a thing, but it's also, I guess, you can go and die and come back again. The whole thing was just absolute insanity to me. like a crazy plot device. But I do agree. I think the character is really good. I like Culber himself. I just wish.
Well, and I like that in season 4 he literally turns into like the counselor of the ship. Like he's like you can't just like he counsels Haru a lot, and he's just like you can't just expect people to be okay. Like you need to let them experience things.
Yeah, and these again are very like modern, like social tropes. These are things that are very modern. This is really appealing to the modern generation. Very specifically, there's a bunch of things that are very specifically appealing to the modern generation. And it's really hard to feel any kind of way about that because it's my desire that there is another generation of Star Trek lovers, right? Like this needs to be another one and then another one. Like it's gotta be. And I'm not going to agree with everything that the next generation comes out with. We're going to have to wrap up the podcast in a couple of minutes here, but this is going to bring us back to the start, right? Like the actual topic of the evening. And that the truth is that this is how generations work. Generations are different. They express themselves in different ways. They rebel in different ways. They have different things that bring them together, and they define themselves by doing something radical. And the generation above them goes, what are these stupid idiots doing? I'm not going to like their music because I don't. I'm just going to say right now, whatever this like modern hip hop that's out now is just absolute trash. And I'm not always going to like everything that they ascribe.
Merrick's never wanted to reveal his age as 65. Oh, God.
But I'm actually 65.
I mean, to be fair, I'm talking about the original series, and I'm clearly not.
Yeah, she's not old enough for that. But what I'm saying is that I'm not going to like everything that comes out like that. But if Star Trek is still out and still doing its job and still pushing the envelope and still making people think and still breaking down boundaries instead of putting them up, I think that the show is doing exactly what it needs to be doing, and we need another generation of that and another one after that, and it just needs to keep going. So I love Star Trek. I will always love Star Trek. You guys have heard a lot of negative things said about like the next generation of Star Trek out there right now, but I want to end on that positive note because I don't need to love every single thing about it for it to do its job in society. Star Trek has a responsibility that is different from every other show out there. Game of Thrones does not need to be doing shit. All right, but Star Trek has shaped generations, man. That's why we all love it. That's why it's 56 years old. And there's things like Prodigy out there now. Listen, man, however I might feel about Discovery or Picard and how sort of like down it is, go watch Prodigy. If I had a kid, that is like the most exciting thing to be watching. It is so inspirational. It's so uplifting. I got goosebumps, man, from head to toe when Janeway pops out and is explaining what the Federation is to those kids. Like, this is Star Trek, and it's time for another generation of it. So I'll be the grumpy old guy in the background, but I'm just glad. I'm glad it's still there.
Well, right, and it's such a wonderful thing because what do we all wish? We just wish that more people and the new generation will start to fall in love with Star Trek, and they need to get to that in whatever way they can. And I think you would probably agree with me in saying that if somebody ends up loving Discovery and Picard and watches Strange New Worlds, and then that brings them to actually rewatch, to watch for the first time the Star Trek that we love. Like, yes. And I think that's kind of what we hope for. I know that's for me. What I hope for is that people will, like, new people coming to Star Trek will then decide, hey, you know what? I've watched all of this stuff. I'm going to go back and watch Next Generation, or I'm going to go back and watch Deep Space Nine, so that they can experience the amazing plot lines and amazing characters and the amazing dialogue that is in those shows that has caused us, like you said, those tears of inspiration. Like you want that for other people. You want to share an experience that was so great for you. You want other people to have it. So, and I would even say that, I know this is more of a out there idea, but it would be nice for me to think that somebody who watches Discovery might end up going back and watching the original series and getting something out of it.
Well, what I was going to say is that even for me, right, when Jennifer and I met, we were both huge Star Trek fans, but I watched all the other Trek and never had seen TOS. She had watched TOS and not seen all the rest of Star Treks, and it was literally me watching all this modern Trek that made me appreciate it in a way that I could go back and watch TOS and see the threads there and get to appreciate it in a way because I never would have. If like, because I am of a generation that TOS is too old. If I wasn't coming at it because of my attachment to Star Trek already, it would not have been possible. And if that's what it takes for modern kids too, right? Like, I get it. I think most people, as they get older, they stop seeing new things all the time, right? They stop watching new things. They stop listening to new music or watching new TV shows. Like, as people get older, they sort of sit in like older stuff. But like what we do is we do a lot of new stuff all the time. So I'm very aware of, because of what we do, like the changing of media. And I went back and rewatched, like I just said, I'm watching TNG episode like 9 right now, like seriously season 1. And I'm keenly aware at this point, it is dated. It is more dated than I think that I felt like it was. I mean, it really is pretty dated for a modern audience. And if it takes them watching Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds to get really in love with the franchise, to be able to go back and watch those because they have a connection to it at that point, then that's the exact same experience I had with TOS and you, Jennifer. So, yeah.
Oh my. I mean, when I was a kid watching the original series episodes, and now I went back and I watched Space Seed from the original series.
Oh, yeah.
I cringed.
Not only dated like graphically and cinematically, but also socially.
No, absolutely. Like socially with the con and the woman. And it was just so hard to watch. And yet I never, when I was watching that as a kid, I had no concept. I didn't understand really what was going on to the same level. But then when I watched it, was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You just have to understand when this was, was filmed.
Live Long Your Podcast says, I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it anymore, and what's it seems weird and scary. It'll happen to you, Sam Simpson.
I was gonna say I think wrapping up with the Simpsons quote is perfect. that describes a lot of what I'm experiencing in my life these days.
I was gonna say applicable to what we're discussing in Star Trek and just about everything else. If you guys haven't experienced this yet, it will happen to you. So get ready. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us for the Night Shift Star Trek podcast. Super excited to have you guys here. Please, if you haven't already, join the Discord. This is where we can sort of communicate with everyone about what we stream, when we stream it, who we stream it with, playing STO, just talking about the latest Star Trek news. And if you guys want to get involved, talk to us about stuff that could appear on the podcast, please do.
The invitation link should be in the description below.
But until next time, guys, Chief Jennifer, Science Officer Azure, love you guys. Thank you for coming.
And we'll hopefully see you next time on the Night Shift. Greetings and felicitations, as Trelane would say. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion. If you've made it this far, we're very grateful to you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share the video. It helps us a great deal. If you'd like to support the Night Shift, we have a Ko-Fi. And to join the discussions, interact with the crew, participate in watch parties, and stay up to date on all of our content, we hope you'll join our Discord. Both links can be found in the description below. We hope you have a wonderful day, and of course, live long and prosper.